You were chosen by the Arcturians. Your timeline just shifted. Stop and listen to that sentence like it landed inside your chest. Feel how it rearranges the air around your breath. You were chosen, not in a thunderbolt or a headline, but in a subtle, precise way. Your field lit up, your coherence spiked, and an observing lattice registered a pattern that matched its own language. For a moment, everything in you synchronized with something off-world and utterly exact. If you are hearing this now, that moment either just happened or it happened within the last few weeks and is still echoing through your body. Notice the body first. Most translations of detection arrive through the body before the mind catches up. A pressure behind your eyes that feels like attention being turned towards you. A pulsing warmth along the back of your neck. Small electric pinpricks across the scalp, like static settling into a new pattern. Time itself seems to hiccup. You missed a bus that should have been on time, and then the person you needed to see appeared anyway. A dream explained a problem that had been looping in the daylight. A song you didn't know the name of plays exactly when you need it. These are not dramatic miracles. They are calibrations. The Arcturian field does not broadcast fireworks. It reads resonance and responds to it. The result you experience is subtle, intimate, and very real if you know where to look. When I say you were chosen by the Arcturians, I mean your frequency registered as coherent within a range they monitor. Think of coherence like a musical note. When a note is out of tune with an instrument, the instrument rejects it. When a note matches the instrument's exact harmonic structure, the instrument begins to resonate with that note, to amplify it. The Arcturians are the instrument that notices the note you are playing. They do not fix you, they do not judge you. They mirror, they amplify. If your inner vibration carries clarity, your outer life will feel the echo. I am going to explain how this works, what you likely have been feeling, why so many practices bring an initial shift and then quiet down, and how to move from episodic spikes of power into sustained, irreversible alignment. I will also give you a safe, low-friction point of engagement now, a single, optional invitation to note your own signal. If this message lands for you, you will feel it as a check-in inside the body. Type one short sentence in the comments only if you feel the pulse. I recognize the Arcturian signal in my life. Just that, only once. Notice what happens in the chest when you acknowledge it. This is not a requirement. It is a small, communal tuning. Now, who are the Arcturians in this frame? Reduce all myth and drama to function. The Arcturians, as I am using the term here, are a collective intelligence that reads fields of coherent frequency across dimensions of perception. Picture them like expert listeners who can detect the exact shape of a pattern within a noisy chorus. They do not impose, they mirror. They are not moralists, not healers in the way you might imagine a doctor. They are amplifiers of coherence. When your internal state is consistent, honest, and stable, they reflect that back, as alignment, as synchronicity, as doors that once seemed closed opening in surprising ways. When your internal state is fractured, wanting one thing while believing another, performing versus being, their reflection is honest but not corrective. They mirror whatever is true in your field, which makes your responsibility central. Change your inner coherence, and the mirror changes what it amplifies. Their method is simple and precise. They read electromagnetic patterns and the subtle bioelectric architecture of human presence. They notice stability, not desire. Presence, not scripts. Imagine a room filled with many radios broadcasting at once. The Arcturian field is like a receiver that can tune exactly into one station, but only when that station is broadcasting clearly. If your station is static and oscillating, they cannot lock on. If your station broadcasts a consistent tone of authenticity, their receiver locks and the room begins to resonate to your frequency. That resonance is what many of you are calling timeline shifting. It is not the erasure of causality. It is the amplification of probability when your inner pattern matches a higher coherence template. You have already seen traces of this. You have probably had at least one sequence where everything rearranged with almost comic efficiency. You think of an old friend, and they call. You make a small decision, and an entire door swings open. You encounter a repeating number sequence that feels like a signal. These are not random. These are small proof points of resonance. The Arcturian field scans millions of micropatterns and registers the ones that match its matrix. You do not need cosmic credentials to be noticed. You need a coherent interior that persists long enough for a receiver to lock in. Pay attention to the difference between noticing and narrating. Many of you have been trained to tell stories about spiritual experiences as proof. This happened, and therefore I must be chosen. That story sometimes becomes a trap. You don't need the story to be true to benefit from the state. The state is what produces the alignment. The story may follow, but it often lags. In other words, state over story, being over wanting. This distinction explains why so many practices work brilliantly for a while and then fade. Think about meditation, breath work, visualization, energetic cleanses. They offer moments of clarity, of coherence. You sit, you breathe, your nervous system settles into a rhythm, and for a time, your field sings. During that period, you experience synchronicities, elevated intuition, and the sense that the world is rearranging to your favor. But the return to baseline is often quick. Old patterns, unresolved belief systems, and the demands of daily life reintroduce noise. The receiver detunes. The Arcturian mirror reflects the new, more fractured signal. The result is understandable frustration. It worked before. Why not now? Because there is a difference between temporary calibration and stabilized coherence. Temporary calibration is like tuning an instrument for one song and then letting it fall out of tune. Stabilized coherence is when the instrument is adjusted and then maintained so it holds its tuning across many performances. The key is integration. Techniques create windows. Integration closes the skill into the nervous system so it becomes the default. That is the pathway to more consistent resonance with the Arcturian field. Let me be clear about what I am not saying. I am not offering a guarantee that every person who reads this will experience identical outcomes. I am not promising cures, legal solutions, or guaranteed wealth. The Arcturian effect increases probability and accelerates feedback loops for those whose inner fields align, but it never overrides personal responsibility. The mirror amplifies what you bring. That is why authenticity is the shortcut. The cleaner your internal signal, the more predictable the reflection. Authenticity is not moral purity. It is alignment between what you feel, what you say, and what you do. When these three dimensions match, your field loses distortion. That lack of distortion makes you legible to the Arcturian receiver. Most people assume authenticity means a certain kind of moral presentation. But often the problem is not ethics, it is inconsistency. You may be spiritually committed in public, yet privately wired for scarcity. You may speak of expansion while hoarding energy out of fear. This mismatch produces a broken waveform. Practices temporarily smooth the waveform, but only integration and honest internal housekeeping maintain it. Here is an exercise to feel into that housekeeping. Sit or stand quietly. Drop your attention into your chest. Breathe slowly and count each breath if it helps. Name, silently, one thing you have been telling yourself about your life that feels partially true and partially performed. Something like, I deserve abundance, that is accompanied by a tightness every time you imagine receiving. As you name it, place your hand lightly over your sternum and notice the sensation under your palm. Does it tremble? Is there a constriction? Does a pressure ease or intensify? Hold the mental phrase and the physical sensation without trying to change either. After a few breaths, shift the phrase to a simpler, more embodied statement. I open to what is true now. Again, feel the chest. If there is a difference at all, an ease, a release, a warming, the field has changed. That small change is not the entire activation. It is an entree. Notice the difference and honor it. Many of you have learned to chase techniques because technique feels productive. A daily ritual becomes a badge of progress. But technique without translation into the nervous system is like taking a beautiful, engineered key and using it only once on a lock that needs constant use to stay lubricated. That's why the Arcturian mirror often reflects more of what you practice unconsciously than what you practice intentionally. Your habitual states, your default frequency, are the templates the mirror reads. You can spend a lifetime polishing rituals while your default field remains the same. The urgent invitation here is not to abandon practice, but to translate practice into embodiment. Embodiment means bringing the pattern into your automatic responses. It means when stress hits, you do not revert immediately into old beliefs. You pause, notice, and return to coherence. It means that your breath, your posture, and your inner dialogue are integrated so that being precedes wanting. The Arcturian field does not reward clever wish lists. It responds to the clarity of presence. This is where many modern spirituality programs miss the mark. They teach you to want better. They do not always teach you how to be better in the ways that matter to a field reader. That is not their failure. It is the limitation of systems that prioritize information over embodiment. You can know all the maps and still be lost if your nervous system is not navigating with you. So how do you move from practice to integration? Start with micro habits that test your coherence in the small moments. When you receive a text that triggers anxiety or envy, practice one recalibration breath before you respond. That breath is not symbolic. It is a tiny correction that aligns your autonomic system with your intention. Over time, dozens of these small corrections rewire the baseline. The Arcturian field does not require grand displays. It requires consistent micro-attunements. Another crucial lever is truthfulness in incremental doses. We often protect ourselves with half-truths because the world seems unsafe for full disclosure. But partial honesty creates internal friction. If you say fine when you are not, you produce a split waveform. Experiment with low-stakes truth. Tell a friend you're tired, or tell a coworker you need 5 minutes. These tiny acts of alignment cut down the internal drama and reduce the static the receiver must filter. Now let us name a few of the precise signs you have been feeling so you can identify the pattern you are living inside. Some of these will be familiar. Some may feel like confirmations that you are not alone in what you are sensing. You may be noticing shifts in time perception. Moments elongate and other moments shorten. You might feel like you lived a whole conversation in a glance, or that certain days compress into an instant. These are not coincidences. These are an indicator that the temporal bandwidth of your nervous system has altered. You may be experiencing repeated, layered synchronicities. The same symbols showing up across different contexts, people entering and exiting your life in choreographed patterns, or your attention being rerouted to a phrase, color, or number that then appears in an outside event. These patterns are the mirror's language. They are the field saying, "We are listening to you." You may also feel pressure in the head or behind the eyes during quiet moments. A subtle density in the upper chest like presence pressing softly against you. Many people interpret this as spiritual weight. In this context, it is calibration. Your system is aligning to a different resonance, and the body responds with sensations designed to make you aware. Dreams intensifying is another common sign. Your dream life becomes more vivid, symbolic, and sometimes directive. Messages arrive in imagery that later clarifies in waking life. Notice without literalizing. Dreams are the subconscious negotiating with the new pattern. Finally, a qualitative shift in the timing of relationships often occurs. People who no longer match your field drift away without drama. New people can appear who seem inexplicably aligned. This is not manipulation. It is field sorting. The mirror amplifies coherence and naturally smooths the path for what matches that coherence. This can feel like loss or like liberation depending on the story you carry, so be gentle with yourself as ties reconfigure. I need to emphasize again, none of these signs are proof in an objective scientific sense. They are subjective indicators that many people report. Consider them barometers rather than verdicts. Use them as data to test your inner change. When you notice one, do not reach for a story to explain it away. Test it by shifting your state and seeing how the environment responds. If you breathe, ground, and speak truthfully and a small ripple follows, you are practicing calibration. If not, you are practicing technique that needs translation. That translation requires two related actions: deep honesty and brave consistency. Deep honesty is the willingness to notice the small contradictions inside you. Brave consistency is the daily refusal to let old narratives dominate your actions. Neither is glamorous. Both are shockingly efficient. We return now to the central mechanism, being versus wanting. Wanting is a vector. It pushes energy outward toward an imagined goal. Wanting is persuasive. It makes lists, repeats affirmations, and visualizes. Being is a field. It is a stable vector that emanates from your center and modifies the probability space around you. Wanting without being is like painting a door on a wall and expecting to walk through it. Being without wanting is a quiet authority that changes the doorway altogether. The Arcturians read being. They mirror it. They increase the fidelity of the environment to that beingness. Imagine you are in a crowded room shouting, "I want quiet." The room hears you, but the energy is scattered. Now imagine sitting in a place of silent confidence. The room quiets around you because your presence reorients the group. The Arcturian field operates more like the second example. It notices a stable source and it amplifies that source's influence across the field. This is why forced positivity can backfire in fieldwork. It creates a surface of coherence without integrating the deeper nervous system shifts required to sustain it. You can smile and say, "I am abundant," while everything beneath the smile is structured around scarcity. The surface appearance might generate some results because the mirror sometimes amplifies external signals. But the amplification will be fragile. Real, lasting amplification requires the interior to match the exterior. All of this brings us to why the window you are currently in matters. Not everyone gets a threshold window at the same historical moment. The Arcturian field's attentiveness is not constant for each person. It responds to trajectories. A threshold is a confluence. Your nervous system is primed, life conditions are loosening old structures, and your soul or sense of purpose is ready to commit. When those three elements align, probability multiplies. Choices made in that window have outside effects because the field is already sensitive to small differences. This is the urgency you feel as a pressure in the chest, not a punishment, but the sense that the present configuration of your life is particularly responsive. It does not mean everything will immediately change. It means that a minor realignment now could cascade into significant shifts. Equally, inaction or avoidance can preserve the old default and allow the window to close. So the moment calls for small, brave movement rather than grandiose overhaul. What constitutes small, brave movement? It is the kind of action that tests the field without trying to force outcome. Speak a truth you have been holding back. Let go of a tiny ratchet of control. Choose a micro-habit that demonstrates you are not only willing to be different, but to practice being different under stress. These acts send a clear, low-noise signal through your system. The Arcturian mirror notices this clarity and responds with extra amplitude. The field does not save you from the results of your choices, but it does make the world more responsive to the coherence you emit. Before we move forward into practices that turn calibration into ongoing coherence, pause and notice what arose for you while I was speaking. Did your breath change? Did a memory surface? Did some part of you resist the idea that you were chosen? Resistance is normal and, in itself, a data point. The mirror will reflect resistance just as honestly as it reflects acceptance. Name it silently. I notice resistance. Place your hand again over the chest and breathe. This small act anchors you in the present and reduces cognitive hypervigilance. There is a deeper reason practices sometimes stagnate, and it is tied to identity. Many spiritual frameworks encourage a version of self that is aspirational, a person who will be once time, money, or validation arrives. The problem is that identity as future delays the coherence the field tracks. The Arcturians are less impressed by who you say you will be and more responsive to who you actually sustain in the small moments. Your timeline can tilt only when your present identity is present enough to shift the probabilities. Identity work is therefore not optional. It is the floor upon which tuning rests. Let me offer a practical adjustment you can begin now. Over the next 72 hours, notice the language you use in private thought. Replace any sentence that carries a future tense identity with a present tense permission. For example, shift "I will forgive someday" to "I allow myself to release this now." Shift "I'll be confident when" to "I practice confidence in small, safe actions today." Do this not as a magic trick, but as an experiment. Observe whether subtle changes in language produce small changes in behavior. Then observe whether those behavior changes alter external feedback loops. Track the correlation as information, not as proof or prooflessness. As you do this, I want you to test one more thing: the small communal activation we opened with. If you felt the alignment earlier, type in the comments the single sentence, "I recognize the Arcturian signal in my life." Keep it brief. Notice what happens inside when you admit that to others. Does something shift? Often, public acknowledgement acts like a tiny coherence amplifier because it requires embodied courage. Again, this is optional. The mirror is not waiting on the comments section to do its work. But community coherence is a multiplier. When individuals in a field synchronize even a little, the field sensitivity increases. We are now approaching the technical heart of the work: how to stabilize rather than spike. But before I outline concrete embodiment practices, let me address a common fear that arises in this territory. What if being chosen obliges me to a destiny I did not ask for? The Arcturian mirror does not coerce destiny. It amplifies which you make clear. If you stabilize around service, it will reflect opportunities for service. If you stabilize around rest and recovery, it will reflect spaces that honor rest. The value neutrality of the mirror is a relief and a responsibility. It means the moral latitude of your life remains yours. It also means that alignment is not about surrendering agency. It is about clarifying it. There is also a social implication worth naming. As your field shifts, relationships will be reweighted. Old relationships may lose their rhythm with you. New ones will appear that require parts of you have not yet practiced. Expect a period of sorting. This is not abandonment. It is reconfiguration. Do not assume that a relationship's end is a moral failure. Think of it as the field adjusting to the new frequency you are holding. Grief is valid. Celebrate what was real. Then return to the practice of micro-honesty and micro-coherence so you can calibrate toward the future you intend. At this point, you might be asking for more tangible tools, practices to translate inspiration into durable shift. I will deliver those practices, but first, one more essential piece must be in place: readiness to accept discomfort as part of recalibration. Shifts in baseline feel strange. When you remove distortion from a circuit, currents adjust. Expect moments of disorientation, fatigue, or emotional surfacing. These are not signs of failure. They are the body and system reorganizing. When this happens, keep the corrective practices small and steady. Breathing, grounding, truth-telling, brief interruptions of habitual thought. Resist the urge to overcorrect with grand gestures. Micro-corrections are more effective at maintaining coherent resonance. Now, as we move into the first set of embodiment practices, bring your awareness back to the chest and breath. The most reliable transmitter you own is your nervous system. Treat it like the primary instrument in this work. The first practice is a 3-minute coherence check you can do anywhere. Set a timer or simply count if that feels better. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6 counts. Keep your shoulders relaxed. As you breathe, say silently, "I am present." Focus on the physical sensations of the breath and the words without trying to imagine outcomes. Do not visualize yet. Keep it purely somatic and linguistic. After 3 minutes, notice any change in the density behind the eyes or the pressure in the chest. That small shift, repeated across days, layers into your baseline. The second practice is situational honesty. Identify one small interaction you will approach differently in the next 24 hours. It could be asking a neighbor for help or telling a colleague you need a clear answer. Before you speak, do a 30-second coherence breath. Speak plainly with modest vulnerability. Observe how the person responds and how your body registers the interaction. This practice integrates truth into social exchange, reducing the internal split between private and public self. The third practice is ritualizing threshold moments. Create a small ceremony for moments when you feel the external field respond. A sunset pause, a single candlelight, a line in your journal that marks "Today I aligned with." These rituals are not superstition. They are linguistic markers that teach your nervous system to recognize alignment and remember it. Over time, the nervous system learns to honor alignment as a familiar state, reducing reversion. If these practices are the scaffolding, then the next step is apprenticeship, holding your field in community. Individual coherence is strong, but coherence multiplied in a group becomes a different kind of leverage. This is why field work in shared spaces, embodied group meditations, coordinated intention exercises, collective micro-rituals can accelerate change. That acceleration is not magical, it is statistical. When multiple coherent systems synchronize, the composite field becomes more legible to amplifiers like the Arcturian receiver. Again, this is not mandatory. It is an optional multiplier for those who desire sustained support. We have now laid the groundwork. You understand how detection works. You know the signs to look for. You have begun to translate wanting into being, and you carry practical micro-habits to build endurance. Ahead lies a deeper module where we will map the precise dynamics of the threshold window you are probably sensing, and where we will offer a compact, potent activation designed to help you step through with integrity. That activation is not a magic spell. It is a coherent sequence that aligns breath, language, and small action so your nervous system signals clearly and consistently. It is also the place where community coherence greatly amplifies the effect. But before we proceed to that activation, I want you to pause and take inventory. What has shifted in your body since the beginning of this transmission? Are the eyes softer? Is the jaw unclenching? Is there a small humming behind the sternum? Name these changes to yourself without needing them to mean anything yet. Let them be data. Your journey from calibration to lasting alignment will be measured not by dramatic breakthroughs alone, but by accumulated small corrections. The Arcturians will notice, and they will mirror what you settle into. Hold that observation a moment. Allow the quiet to gather. You are in a rare, receptive configuration. The next sequence will require clarity and commitment. When you are ready, we will move into a precise activation that layers breath, a brief phrase, and a behavioral hinge to help you choose a new vector for your timeline. That activation is optional, potent, and designed to be repeatable. It is the next step after the microhabits we have already practiced, and it bridges individual coherence to the possibility of a broader temporal shift. For now, keep breathing. Keep noticing. Keep doing the small acts of honesty and presence. The field is listening. The lattice is sensitive. You were noticed because your waveform matched a pattern the receiver recognizes. What you do next will not be determined by cosmic favor or external decree. It will be determined by the clarity you manage to hold in the quiet moments. The threshold is near, and where you choose to stand when it opens will change how the mirror responds. Where you choose to stand when the window opens will change how the mirror responds. Now imagine the window itself with a little more specificity. A threshold is not a theatrical event. It is a shifting of sensitivity. It looks, in practical terms, like three overlapping currents: your nervous system's readiness, life circumstances loosening their grip, and a clear enough intention or purpose that the field can recognize. When they line up, the margin between intention and effect thins. Choices you make in that margin do not guarantee a future, but they redirect probability with disproportionate force. Notice how small the requirements are. You do not need a dramatic transformation plan. The threshold prefers clarity over complexity. It prefers a body that can register tiny differences and a mind willing to make modest, decisive moves. In other words, the threshold favors the person who can practice coherence under pressure, the one who can return to a baseline quickly after being triggered. That is why the microhabits we described matter so much. They convert moments of insight into a steady hum. Let me give you a compact map of what typically happens inside this window, so you can navigate rather than be surprised. First comes the spike, an initial perceptible change in somatic register, lightness in the chest or that tiny pressure behind the eyes, a softness in the jaw. This is the receiver adjusting its dial. Next comes feedback, small alignments in the environment that do not necessarily look like your grand vision but feel like correction. A phrase in conversation, a serendipitous email, a timing that rearranges to let you pass. Then comes sorting. Relationships or projects that no longer match your emergent pattern quietly shift. Finally, consolidation. If you act in alignment repeatedly, the new pattern settles into a new baseline, and the mirror's amplification becomes less episodic and more sustained. Each of these phases is an invitation to respond with coherence. React with anxiety, and you will generate noise. Respond with small, deliberate recalibration, and you increase legibility. The difference between noise and signal is what the Arcturian lattice reads. This is the moment to offer you the activation I promised, a practical sequence that is short, repeatable, and oriented toward nervous system clarity rather than theatrical experience. It is a bridge, breath, phrase, and a small behavioral hinge. You may repeat it now, silently, or later when you have privacy. There is no need to type anything. If you choose to use it, notice the sensations as data, not proof. Activation sequence. 1. Settle your body into stillness for 90 seconds. If you can, sit with a straight spine. If not, rest your feet on the floor. Drop your attention into the midline of the chest. 2. 3 breaths to stabilize. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 2, exhale for 6. On the exhale, imagine letting soft tension flow away from the heart space. Keep your face relaxed. Let the eyes soften. 3. Introduce the phrase once, gently. Say to yourself with quiet conviction, I step through the Arcturian threshold. Do not perform it. Speak it as an orientation. Allow the words to resonate as a vector rather than a demand. 4. Repeat the short breath pattern twice more, maintaining attention on the chest. Notice any shift, warmth, tingling, a loosening in the throat, a subtle lengthening of time. These are signals of calibration, not proof of destiny. 5. Behavioral hinge. Choose one small, concrete act you will do in the next 24 hours that expresses your readiness. Make it narrow and executable within 10 minutes. Examples: send a brief message you've been postponing, accept a short meeting you've been avoiding, or remove one tiny item that symbolizes an old contract. The hinge must be an act that aligns with the phrase you just used. It is your first test of translated coherence. 6. After the act, note the aftermath for 5 minutes. Journal a sentence. What happened in the body? What shifted externally? What resisted? Keep it short. This is how you train the nervous system to map internal calibration to external response. This sequence is not a guarantee. It increases the signal-to-noise ratio inside you and creates a small, testable vector for the field to mirror. If nothing dramatic occurs, you have still practiced integration. If something subtle changes, a conversation goes differently, a timing aligns, you have new data to reinforce the baseline. A few practical notes about using the activation responsibly. First, repetition matters, not intensity. Use this short sequence daily rather than waiting for a single perfect moment. Daily micro-attunements are how the instrument holds its tuning. Second, honor limits. If, after the breath or phrase, you encounter overwhelming emotion, scale down. Hold the phrase softer or simply breathe into the chest without saying anything. The system recalibrates through gentleness as much as through conviction. 3. Watch for social ripple effects. As you change, everything around you will feel the difference. Expect friction and allow time for the world to sort itself. Do not assume every relational shift is a moral failure or cosmic punishment. It is field architecture rebalancing. People often ask what it looks like when someone actually integrates this work across months. I will not give you a single success story as an example, because outcomes vary. Instead, imagine a simple pattern repeated in dozens of lives. Someone begins with the 3-minute coherence check, then pairs it with micro-honesty in one interaction a day. Over a period of weeks, their reactive spikes become smaller, their baseline steadier. The mirror begins to respond more reliably. More consistent ease and timing, fewer intense course corrections, opportunities that are not grand miracles but practical openings. A job that aligns, a move that feels right, a relationship that fits. None of these are magical rescues. They are statistical shifts in the probability landscape. The Arcturian lattice amplifies what the stabilized organism broadcasts. A common fear arises here. What if the physics of this attention requires me to change everything I love? The answer is no and yes. The lattice does not demand moral corrections. It amplifies clarity. If clarity reveals that some things must be released for the sake of integrity, then loss may be part of the process. But clarity can also reveal previously hidden pathways inside your existing life that allow for expansion without wrenching renunciation. The choice is yours, amplified, not dictated. Now, I want to give you a few troubleshooting tools if the activation feels like a dud. First, check the micro-habits. Are you returning to breath when triggered, or are you letting old narratives take over? Often, the activation fails because the background baseline is noisy. That is fixable with repetition. Second, look at alignment. Is your behavioral hinge actually small and achievable, or is it a grand performance designed to prove something? If it's the latter, shrink it. Third, evaluate expectations. You are working with probability fields, not binary spells. Observe patterns across 72 hours, not just in the moment. You may also feel pressure to know what membership or deeper training could provide. Those who find this transmission resonant often crave sustained scaffolding, not because the work is impossible alone, but because the social field supports retention. If you are curious, here is an outline of what a member circle built for this fieldwork would include. Consider it a description rather than a recruitment pitch. Membership is optional, and no one's choice to join changes the validity of your experience. Member Circle, what it provides. Weekly extended transmissions that follow the breath phrase action pattern, each lasting longer and including guided embodiment practices to build nervous system memory. Monthly focused modules on translating technique into automatic responses, micro-honesty training, stress-specific coherence drills, and threshold rehearsal sequences. Small cohort integration groups, limited size, so you practice holding your field with others and receive gentle accountability for micro-habits. Live Q&A sessions to troubleshoot obstacles in real time, practical, not theoretical, with recordings available. A private, moderated community space for sharing observations, not performance. The emphasis is on data, not story. Optional mini-retreats, virtual or in-person when available, structured around embodied calibration rather than spectacle. Membership is a container for sustained practice. It is priced to support the team that holds the fieldwork and the infrastructure for group coherence. It is not, and will never be presented as, a shortcut to guaranteed outcomes. Joining increases your access to guided practice and communal field amplification. It does not replace your responsibility to do the inner work. If you are considering membership, ask yourself simple questions. Did the transmission land? Do you find consistent value in guided practice? Do you want relational scaffolding to maintain microhabits? If the answer is yes, the circle may be helpful. If you feel uncertain, continue with the free practices and test the activation repeatedly before deciding. Before we close, there is one final optional ritual to anchor the threshold work into your day-to-day life. Use it once in the next 24 hours after you perform the activation sequence and your behavioral hinge. It is brief and designed to signal consolidation. Consolidation ritual. 1. After your hinge act, sit for 3 minutes with the same breath cadence we trained earlier. Keep attention in the chest. 2. Softly say to yourself the commitment sentence once. I step through the Arcturian threshold. Do not say it as a demand, say it as alignment. 3. Place one hand over the sternum. Feel the warmth and any remaining resistance. 4. Commit to one modest maintenance action for the next 72 hours. A nightly 2-minute coherence check, a single moment of truth-telling daily, or a micro-breath before every reactive message. 5. At the end of 72 hours, journal one paragraph. What changed, what stayed the same, and one hypothesis about how to maintain momentum. Use this as experimental data for your practice. Again, treat all sensations as data. If you feel a sudden surge of emotion, acknowledge it. If you feel nothing at all, note that too. The field is patient and statistical. It responds to aggregated coherence more than instant validation. A few parting notes about social dynamics as your field shifts. Be prepared for practical friction. Friends or colleagues may not immediately recognize the interior changes you are making. That is normal. Practice explicating small requests and boundaries rather than assuming others will intuit your new profile. Expect grief and celebration in unequal measure. Be generous with yourself. Integration takes time. Also, be mindful of humility. The Arcturian lattice amplifies clarity, not moral virtue. A clearer field can be used poorly, just as ambiguity can be used poorly. Let your growing responsiveness be paired with reflection and accountability. If you hold power in your sphere, use it with the care you would give a fragile instrument. Remember that freedom and responsibility rise together.
Finally, bring the title of this transmission into your spatial imagination as a compass, not a certificate. You were chosen by the Arcturians. This is the first fact of recalibration. Your timeline just shifted. This is the context of urgency. But neither statement absolves you of action. They supply attention.
What comes next is your work, to translate those two sentences into daily choices that keep your field legible. If you feel called to sustain this work in group, the member circle is offered as one practical resource. If you do not, the sequence and micro-habits are designed to be wholly sufficient for steady progress when practiced consistently. The lattice responds to you, not to membership cards. Before I leave you, take one final moment to notice your body now. Is the chest lighter? Is there a small space where previously there was a knot? Whatever you feel, even a little softening, treat it as a calibration. Breathe once more at the 4-2-6 rhythm. Anchor the word inside you if it fits. I step through the Arcturian threshold. Carry it as a vector, not a decree. You were chosen by the Arcturians, and in that choosing, your timeline has shifted. What you do with the shift will determine where that timeline bends. Choose small, choose brave, choose with integrity. The mirror will answer what you offer.